Out in the ocean, off the coast of Japan, there's an island made entirely of concrete. For decades, thousands of people lived here. Families, children, entire communities, packed into these crumbling buildings. And then one day, everyone left. Today, the island sits silent, rotting in the middle of the sea, and slowly being swallowed by time. This is Hashima Island, better known as Battleship Island. At first glance, Hashima looks like a floating prison, or the ruins of a war zone. But this place wasn't built for soldiers. It was built for coal. In the late 1800s, Japan needed energy. Industry was exploding. Cities were growing. And beneath this lonely rock in the ocean, coal was discovered. A company called Mitsubishi stepped in and everything changed. Massive seawalls were built. Concrete towers rose straight up from the rock. Bit by bit, Hashima became something almost unbelievable. A man-made city in the middle of the sea. Tiny, overcrowded, but full of life. At its peak, more than 5,000 people lived on Hashima. That made it one of the most densely packed places on Earth. More crowded than New York City or Tokyo. Everything you needed existed right here. There were long apartment blocks stacked like concrete cages, narrow corridors that felt like tunnels, and rooftops that doubled as playgrounds for the children. There was a school, a hospital, a bathhouse where miners washed off the dust after work. Shops, markets, even bars and tiny restaurants squeezed into corners of the island. For many families, life rarely went beyond these walls. Some children grew up believing the world ended at the ocean barrier. Beyond that wall was nothing, just endless water. Life was harsh but steady. The work was dangerous. The winters were cold. Typhoons slammed the island with violent winds and waves. But the mines meant food, housing, and security. If you worked, you survived. Families gathered at night under dim lights. Neighbors looked out for one another. In a strange way, there was community here. But beneath their feet, deep underground, the future was already starting to run out. Coal seams were thinning. Accidents were increasing. And the outside world was beginning to change. And soon, everything that made this island feel alive would disappear. For decades, coal fueled Japan. It powered factories, lit up cities, and drove the engines of progress. Hashima was part of that machine, a fortress of concrete and smoke, feeding an entire nation. But then the world changed. Oil arrived, cheaper, faster, easier. Tankers crossed the oceans. Refineries sprang to life. Energy was no longer dug from the earth. It flowed like water. Suddenly, coal wasn't the future anymore. It was a burden. On Hashima, the mines had to go deeper. Tunnels stretched farther beneath the sea. The air grew hotter. Walls groaned. Gas collected in the dark. Accidents became more frequent and more deadly. And every meter deeper cost more money than the last. Above ground, life carried on. Children walked to school. Workers lined up for the morning ferry. Families cooked dinner in tiny rooms. But below their feet, the numbers stopped working. Maintaining schools, hospitals, housing, seawalls, electricity, all of it cost more than the coal was worth. And Japan was changing, too. Cities were modernizing. Oil was everywhere. Coal looked old, expensive, unnecessary. By the early 1970s, Mitsubishi faced a decision. Not an emotional one, a financial one. Reports were written. Meetings were held. The island was studied like a broken machine. And finally, the conclusion. Hashima was no longer worth saving. One announcement, one decision. And everything that made this island feel alive was suddenly temporary. Windows stopped being repaired. Rust spread across railings. Buildings began to crumble. The future here was already gone. In 1974, the mine officially closed. No speeches, no ceremony, just a notice and an ending. Within weeks, boats arrived, not carrying supplies anymore, but carrying people away. Show boats pulling up, suitcases, boxes, people waiting in silence. Families packed what they could carry. Entire lives reduced to a few bags. Doors slammed shut for the last time. Lights went dark, one building at a time. Some things were left behind, dishes still on shelves. Children's toys on the floor. Furniture too heavy to move. Objects frozen midlife. The ferries kept coming, each trip taking fewer people than the last. Until one day, there was only one boat left. The last ferry pulled away from the dock. No crowds, no waving hands, no reason to look back. No one returned. The ocean kept moving. The building stayed. And Hashima was left alone with its concrete, its memories, and the sound of the wind. Without people, Hashima didn't just empty. It began to collapse. Salt water crept into every crack. Steel rusted from the inside out. Concrete swelled, split, and failed. Typhoons slammed the island year after year. Windows shattered. Doors were torn loose. Entire rooms were ripped open to the sea. No one repaired the damage. No one replaced what was lost. The buildings were left to fight the elements alone. Rainwater pooled on abandoned floors. Ceilings sagged. Beams groaned under their own weight. Stairwells crumbled into nothing. Steps leading nowhere. Landing suspended over empty air. Entire floors collapsed without warning. What had once been solid became hollow. Beneath the island, it was worse. The tunnels that once fed the city shifted and weakened. Supports failed. Walls bowed. Passages flooded. The deeper you went, the more unstable it became. Eventually, even explorers stopped trying. Hashima was no longer just abandoned. It was dangerous. Time did the rest. Years passed. Decades. Nature reclaimed what industry had taken. Vines crawled through broken windows. Trees grew where children once played. Birds nested in rooms meant for families. Over time, Hashima went from a thriving city to a ruin, a concrete skeleton standing alone in the sea, not destroyed in a single moment, but slowly, inevitably, forgotten. For years after the evacuation, no one was allowed here. Hashima wasn't abandoned. It was sealed. Rusted fences rose along the seawalls. Warning signs faded in the salt air. The island was declared unstable, unsafe, forbidden. Not because of what people might find, but because of what could happen to them. Whispers began to circulate. Explorers spoke quietly of deadly falls, hidden elevator shafts swallowed by darkness, floors that looked solid until they weren't. Entire buildings were said to be one strong wind away from collapse. Stairwells that ended in open air, rooms hanging over the sea with nothing beneath them. One wrong step, and the island would take you with it. Eventually, the ban loosened. Tours were allowed, carefully controlled, tightly restricted. Visitors were kept on reinforced walkways, paths designed not to explore the island, but to survive it. Most of Hashima remains completely off-limits. No wandering, no entering buildings, no touching what time has hollowed out. And maybe that's for the best. Some places don't want to be rediscovered. They want to be left alone. Today, Hashima Island stands as a monument, not to ghosts, but to what happens when a place outlives its purpose. A city built for progress. Abandoned when the world moved on. Left here in silence, surrounded by endless waves. Would you visit this island, knowing what's waiting inside these ruins? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy exploring forgotten worlds like this, subscribe because there are many more places left to uncover.